I woke up angry today. Not passing sort of irritation you get when the bloody Wi-Fi is not working or the kettle seems to be taking forever to boil. I mean that deep, simmering anger that comes from watching the exact same pattern repeat for decades. News reports saying that the UK is getting involved in military action in the Middle East. Again. Another conflict, another deployment, another pile of billions that somehow appeared overnight. And that's the moment that I started to question. Because it's when a question hits you, right? Where the hell was that money when people here needed it? Because look around Britain right now. Really look. People are skipping meals so their kids can eat a decent meal. Food banks have become a permanent fixture in every town that once prided itself on looking after their own. People dread the weekly shop because the price of basic food feels like it changes every time we blink. Energy bills are making people extremely nervous and anxious. Rent and mortgages keep creeping up. And that quiet anxiety about money sits in the background of our daily life like a low-level headache that you just cannot seem to get rid of. And then there's the NHS. Millions of people waiting for treatment. Millions waiting to speak to a doctor. Mental health services stretched so bloody thin that people are pushed into remote therapy, medication cycles, or waiting lists that just drag on for months and months and often years. Some of them are 7 or 8 years long. If you're struggling mentally right now, good luck getting real one-to-one help quickly. You'd be lucky if your phone rings this month or even this year. That's the reality in this country. And yet, when conflict erupts thousands of miles away, suddenly billions of pounds materialise. But my anger isn't really about war. Before anybody jumps to conclusions, this isn't pretending that the rest of the world doesn't exist and doesn't matter. Of course it does. All lives matter. And I get, countries have alliances. We have military commitments, defence agreements, NATO obligations. Governments will always argue that involvement abroad is about stability, security, and preventing bigger conflicts later. And that's fine. I guess that's the geopolitical reality. But that isn't what people are reacting to. The anger comes from the contrast. We've been told for years that this nation is skint, that budgets are tight, that public services must tighten their belts, that reforms take time. Then, the moment a crisis breaks out somewhere else, governments suddenly find billions down the back of the national sofa. To the average person trying to pay their bloody bills, that feels like a kick in the teeth. I mean, talking about teeth, who can actually get a dentist these days? The system has been drifting this way for decades. The truth is uncomfortable, and it doesn't belong to one political party. Labour blames Conservatives. Conservatives blame Labour. But occasionally, both blame global markets. They blame pandemics, inflation, or whatever crisis is convenient this week. Meanwhile, the public watches the same theatre playing out across the dispatch box in Parliament. Grown adults trading insults like school kids in a bloody playground. And that's what we're paying for. Nothing ever changes. Waiting lists stay long. Public services stay stretched and being cut. The cost of living gets higher and higher. And the people running large systems, whether government departments or large corporations, a lot of tech, remember, and a lot of consultants, they just walk away with enormous salaries for managing meetings about managing meetings. If you're the average citizen, though, trying to get a GP appointment through an online form designed by someone who clearly never had to use the bloody thing themselves, that disconnect becomes painfully obvious. Modern war makes the whole thing feel worse. There's another element to this that I hear very few people talking about. War is now live entertainment. Drone footage, missile strikes, satellite maps, real-time commentary on YouTube. Military analysts pointing at digital maps like they're breaking down a bloody football match. Someone sitting in a control room thousands of miles away presses a button and suddenly a building disappears on a live stream clip 5 minutes later. Sometimes the target is exactly who they're aiming for. Sometimes it isn't. And very often civilians are caught in the middle far more often than anyone likes to admit. A joystick war broadcast between adverts for some nutrition drink or a VPN. You see, what the average person in Britain wants, because let's face it, we're not heartless. They don't want suffering anywhere. But millions of people are just exhausted. They're tired of hearing that help is coming soon. The help for us. The help for our NHS. The help for our, mental health and physical health services. They're tired of consultations, reviews, and committees that promise change in 5 years' time or whenever. They're tired of systems that seem designed to make basic things harder than they ever needed to be. They just want a bloody break. They want a country where seeing a doctor doesn't feel like winning the lottery, where heating your home doesn't feel like a financial gamble, where putting decent food on the table doesn't require a spreadsheet of your budget. And when the government can suddenly spend billions abroad while people here are still struggling with the basics, it raises an obvious question. Not about whether the world matters, of course it does. Not about whether other people matter, of course they do. But about whether the people living in this country matter enough. Because if billions can appear overnight for missiles and military deployments, perhaps the system isn't quite as skint as we're being told. Perhaps it's been prioritizing the wrong things for far too long.